The wait is finally over. We actually have 2.1 beta leaks after what feels like a million years. But finally, Acheron's first beta kit is finally here. As expected, it's literally the most amount of text I've ever seen in my life, so in this video I'll try and break it down as well as I can. The giveaway I'm hosting for 6,000 subscribers is still active, so join my Discord server where I'll be theory crafting Acheron and Aventurin. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Acheron's talent is where I'll be starting off, as I believe it's the most important part of her kit and the rest of her abilities center around it. Acheron does not use energy like the rest of the cast. Instead, she uses a stacking system which she can gain stacks for by using the rest of her kit. Once Acheron reaches 9 of these stacks, she can use her ultimate. When any character inflicts debuffs on an enemy target, Acheron gains 1 of these stacks, which can be triggered once per action. This works differently to ratio, as the amount of debuffs applied doesn't matter. If the debuff is inflicted on multiple targets, the stack will be granted to the enemy with the most stacks. This will generally be an elite or boss enemy, as they have the highest HP stat. When an enemy with stacks is defeated, it will also be transferred to the enemy with the most stacks. Acheron's basic attack is pretty standard, inflicting 1 stack and dealing some lightning damage, whilst her skill is a blast attack which inflicts 2 stacks onto the primary target and deals lightning damage to them, with a smaller multiplier to the adjacent targets. These are pretty simple abilities, dealing pretty okay damage, and mostly are here to compromise for her 10-page ultimate. To summarize, Acheron's ultimate ignores all weakness types, similar to Shui's ultimate. It also reduces all enemies' resistance to lightning by up to 25% until the end of the ultimate. The ultimate itself begins by triggering Rainblade, dealing lightning damage to a single target and removing 3 stacks from them. When the stacks are removed, Acheron additionally deals 1 instance of lightning damage to all enemies. Each stack removed will increase the damage multiplier by an additional amount. Rainblade can be activated 3 times for all 9 stacks, and after this another effect is triggered. This deals lightning damage to all enemies and removes all stacks remaining on any targets. Basically, to summarize, this removes all stacks from enemies and deals a mixture of single target and AoE damage based on the amount of stacks consumed, with a massive AoE finisher which deals huge damage to all targets remaining on the field. This is where most of her damage comes from, and she can actually use her ultimate very consistently now with the new bonus action trace, allowing her to essentially 2-turn ult at E0 with an optimal team. This is much better than before, as in the past you'd essentially have to wait 10 years for her to use her ultimate, as teammates could not apply stacks. This now means that you can see her pretty ult animation really often, which I am sure everyone is happy about. Moving on to Acheron's traces, the first grants 4 stacks towards her ultimate at the start of the battle. This allows her to open the battle with 6 stacks after her first turn, essentially allowing her to 1-turn ult with the help of some debuffs from her teammates. Acheron's second trace is really insane. When she has 1 or 2 Nihility teammates, she increases her own damage dealt from her basic attack, skill and ultimate by 15% or 60% based on the amount of teammates. This does not include herself. This sounds like an okay trace until you realize its damage dealt. Regular damage percent is an additive multiplier, whereas this trace is multiplicative. In normal people terms, this just means that all her damage is multiplied by 15 or 60%, which is completely unit defining and pretty crazy. It's generally always better to max out this trace than running a Harmony character, and since she can 2-turn ult without the help of Sparkle or Bronya, it's not the worst thing in the world to be locked off from using them. Unfortunately, this does mean her teammate selection is pretty unbearably mid. But with future Nihility characters coming out, it's not really that bad. Her third and final trace increases the damage dealt by Acheron by 30% whenever her ultimate hits an enemy target with a stack on them. This can be stacked up to 3 times and lasts for 2 turns. Her Lightcone is the final part of her base kit, increasing the damage of the wearer by 36% and having a 100% base chance of inflicting the empty bubbles effect to the enemy, lasting for 1 turn. This can be triggered 1 per target, and the wearer deals 24% more damage to enemies afflicted. Additionally, this also increases ultimate damage by 24%. The main value of this Lightcone is the fact that it applies an additional debuff to the enemy, similar to Kafka's Lightcone. Since Acheron doesn't actually inflict any herself, this makes her ultimate rotations much more smoother, which makes the Lightcone pretty good. Overall, Acheron's base kit is pretty good. There's nothing too game-breaking here aside from the trace, but she looks to be a pretty interesting fun DPS character. Most of her earlier issues from beta are mostly solved now, as she can use her ult consistently and the lack of harmony teammates doesn't hurt her at all at E0, as the trace mostly makes up for the damage loss. She also has really good synergy with Acheron and Gallagher, so people who want to pull them are eating pretty good if you want to play them both together. Moving on to her Eidolons, Acheron's E1 increases her crit rate towards debuffed enemies by 18%. This is obviously a great E1, free crit rate is always appreciated, especially when it's unconditional like this one. Her E2, just like Dan Heng's, is really insane. Like before, this lowers the nihility trace to only require 1 instead of 2 for the maximum effect, whilst opening the floodgates for you to use broken harmony characters like Sparkle, Ruan Mei and Bronya. Now I don't know about you, but going from Pella to Sparkle sounds like a pretty huge upgrade to me. Additionally, to make up for the fact that she won't be using 2 nihility characters, Acheron's E2 also gives her an additional stack of her ultimate whenever it's her turn and makes her abilities apply an extra stack too. This means that on her turn she can get 4 stacks of her ultimate, which allows her to very consistently 2-turn ultimate, whilst also gaining the full benefits of widening her support options. This is really obviously a character-defining Eidolon, and I'd probably recommend to stop here if you plan to pull for them. Acheron's E4 makes her ultimate inflict a vulnerability debuff on the enemy, making all enemies take 12% more ultimate damage for 2 turns. This is pretty mid by itself, but when combined with her E6 makes this a really good Eidolon overall. Speaking about her E6, this makes all her abilities do ultimate damage, and makes Acheron do 60% more crit damage when dealing damage with an ultimate. This basically lets her skill and basic attack take advantage from all the ult scaling in her kit, from her Lightcone to her E4. This basically makes her entire kit nuke instead of just one part, which makes this a really fun Eidolon. Overall, Acheron looks pretty good. Sadly, I can't talk too much about my thoughts on her now, because I have an Acheron video to make. But anyways, remember to join the Discord and I'll see you guys in the next video.